Hi there. It's me again. Today I want to talk about a couple things. One of them is everything's kind of motivated by temp score, and I know there's a lot of feelings about temp, and I just want to talk about them, how you can sort of turn that barrier into an entry point for making your score better. The first thing about temp that I gleaned from having a conversation with a really good producer was no matter what you say as a composer, a temp score is not for you. The reason why it exists is so people who are on the cutting room who need to show their work to a lot of different people, they need to know what the final product is gonna kind of look and feel like. And in the absence of score, you are missing kind of that subliminal narrative element. So think about that. I mean, the temp isn't there to make things harder for you. It's there to make it easier. And at the end of the day, if you know how to work with it, it really does. Like you're not gonna, it's not in your control. You're not gonna push back and say, "Rah, do this," because I'm a temperamental composer who can't interpret temp score. So, what I want to walk you through is what this scene is doing, what the temp was doing, and what I did, and what I extracted from the temp that helped me convey more effectively what the scene needed. So the first thing I'm going to do is play this through
You're having one right now.
with no music, just so you can see what it's like to be a composer and to watch a scene without music. So just a little backstory on this. This is Philip. He's the historian on the team. This is the very first episode. So Philip's been sent back into the body of a heroin addict. They didn't know that. They didn't know that. So it sucks, but compounding his sort of emotions is the fact that he is aware of everyone dying. He's had this upgraded memory thing that he knows the time and place everyone dies, and this is the first time that he is experiencing this powerlessness, that he has to sort of keep his conviction in that he could have saved this guy's life, but he's not allowed to, because he's not allowed to change the timeline to that degree. So what that means is this scene is kind of about this guy dying, but more importantly, the scene is about Philip's guilt and the weight that he has to carry around. So the first thing, when I play it
My
through,
phone, it's in the car.
just with the music
Help me.
muted,
I can't, Mr.
so there's
Gower.
no temp
Let's find
score.
someone with a phone.
I can't. I'm sorry.
You can. I won't come after you, I
I'm
promise.
supposed to die this afternoon.
Oh, you don't know.
I mean, the
I
performances
knew
are
the moment that I heard
fantastic.
your name.
Everything's cut
Call
well, but
911 and go.
Because we
it's put
considered you
together
as a
with music
host.
in mind. And you can see
The heart
that
attack
second
was
little
inevitable
bumpy
within
wave
days.
is the split track. That's the temp score.
I'm okay. I think I'm okay.
So it's a good scene. It's heavy. It's weighty. Performances. He's dead now. The performances are good. There's a sense of tragedy happening here, but it's not. It has to be elevated by something, and that just happens to be music that tells you how to feel. So the temp is Cliff Martinez, cue from Drive. That's just whatever the editor picked.
Just didn't know
And I
that
think
would
they
be-
selected
Call 911 and go.
Because we considered you
pretty
as a
good,
host.
like a pretty good emotion
The
there.
heart attack was inevitable within days.
I'm okay. I think I'm okay.
Okay, so that more or less works. Now, it's not purpose built, and it's not exactly bang on what we want, but it's close. What it has is the sense of weight and emotion that we want to convey. So that right there is the advice that I would give is when someone is married to the temp, and you get this a lot, it's a whole phenomenon called temp love, is that the director has sat and spent so much time watching this, or the producer or the editor, whoever it is, they've spent so much time watching it to this music over and over as they cut and refine and edit. They're married to it and they love it. It would be like you wake up in the morning and your wife's formerly beautiful, melodious voice now sounds like Joe Pesci. It'd be a bit of a turn off. It'd be weird. She's still your wife. You'd still love her, but it's jarring. It's not the feeling that you want from that. So we don't want to go Joe Pesci on it, but we don't want to copy the exact sound. We don't want to copy the harmonic movement. What we want to find out is what the core emotional effect of that piece of music is when it goes to picture what's being created, because oftentimes things can kind of create counter-intuition, or they can convey exactly what's literally there. We have to sort of figure that out. And in this case, there's quite literally an emotion that's being conveyed there. So first thing I gotta do is interpret that. Then I have to use my musical voice and understanding and vocabulary to say, hey, like what technical utilities can I use? I really like choral music and old hymns and churchy stuff, churchy stuff, that's a technical form. But so I looked at this, and on one hand, I guess if I was going to interpret the scene, which we're watching here, is this is one of the most important aspects, and this is why in one of my other videos I said reading a shit ton of literature is probably one of the most important aspects of scoring, because you need to interpret story in a way that is probably better than a writer. You need to have that capacity because you need to add another layer of sort of emotional complexity to it. So what we have to look at here is, what is this scene about? It's like, okay, it's sad, he's dying, but is it about him dying? I didn't think so. When I watched this through, this scene is 100% the way Philip's dialogue is stomping on his sort of little deathbed thing and everything. This scene is about Philip. This scene is about Philip's guilt and the tragedy, both of the death of Detective Gower, that's the guy there, and the fact that Philip has the awareness and the knowledge and the ability to save him, but he can't. He absolutely cannot change the timeline. So what we want to play here is the tragedy combined with, there's a sincerity absolutely there. He's tortured, that's absolutely it, but then the temp really is beautiful, and I thought that sense of beauty juxtaposes with the tragedy, the ugliness of the alley, the darkness of the scenario. It creates a beautiful juxtaposition when we do something nice. So what I did, I did something initially choral, and that was the root of my idea. This is a choir. If I just did some dumb stuff to it, I put it through a super washy reverb, so it slows it down, it pulls it back in time, and that's what I want. It floats things through. That's what I wanted, is that
I knew the moment that I heard your name. I just didn't know that I would.
Piece,
911 and go.
Because we considered you as a host.
you can see it builds intensity
A heart attack was
with
inevitable within days.
Philip's performance. And then this moment's really effective because this is when Gower dies.
I think I'm okay.
So we didn't do anything big there. We pulled back. But then right here is interesting because where I have to made a different decision, I would have done a key change there, but I just did a recapitulation of the first few chords, and then I didn't resolve it. So so it doesn't go back down. It washes over to the next scene very much unresolved, and that's okay. That's what we want, because it's not over for Phil. This is just the beginning for him having to deal with this intense guilt over and over and over. He's gotta learn to do it. Plus, he's got the heroin, so it's extra hard. So in addressing Temp score, we have to spend so much of our time listening to Temp score that I would suggest don't waste your time listening to scores out of context. Watch scores in context for sure. Analyze what they're doing, figure out the function, see what the composer was trying to convey, and go from there. Use that as a starting point, because there is such a rich history in music, and film scores and stuff are new. They're like, their initial thing was just that they're very derivative and diluted, not diluted, but they were just, they were diluted classical music. That's what it was. And film and TV especially is getting much more sophisticated, which calls for something different. Now, what I don't think that you should do to sort of homogenize your sound is get too caught up listening to scores, because there's always going to be a better piece of music where someone had more time and they had more, just the ability to write excellent music on its own from nothing creates music that is much more worth listening to. And at the same time, if you are to sort of extract the simple ideas from something like a Schoenberg piece, if you just kind of distill that to its basic raw functional emotion, what score has to do is be able to be emotionally efficient, I guess is the word, in that you don't want anything superfluous, anything extra, anything added. Like on this cue, I could have demonstrated that I can write soaring, sweeping French horn lines. I probably can't. I mean, who am I kidding? But I could have done like another big melody with that. But I just chose really simple, mostly second inversion chords with a little bit of movement here and there. It's distilled is what it is. It's basically, I could have taken 4 layers of complexity and I just boiled them down to one, the absolute most accessible, functionally effective, poignant emotion. Like, it has the sense of power. At the same time, it has tragedy, and it's... Oh, there's the little... Yeah, I mean, it's basically what I'm trying to say is that temp isn't a bad thing unless you fight it, and you can't control it, so you need to understand that because it's out of your control, you need to learn to work with it. And once again, it's not for you, the composer, it's for all the producers and directors and everyone on the team. And it just basically, it eliminates a variable in that you see that, okay, they've done this to picture. That saves me having to sit down and hammer out a bunch of ideas. It's like, okay, cool, like that's there, that works. So that gives me a starting point. It gives me a reference, sort of a fixed point that I can draw from. But it's very important to watch everything.
I won't come after you, I
You're
promise.
supposed to die this afternoon.
No, you don't know.
It's really important to
I knew the
watch
moment that I heard your name. I just
without
didn't
any
know that I would
music
be
too.
here.
Call 911.
Because that's kind of
and-
like your palate cleanser and your refresher. It's really cool if you can actually go through and watch everything without any music at all. That'll really, really exercise your instinct and your intuition. But then it gets to a scenario where maybe if you don't listen to any of the temp, there are points where the temp really worked and you could have extracted something from it, combined with the fact that that's probably what the producer wants because that's how they've been hearing it. So you need to learn to work with temp. And obviously techniques for that are learning to write very emotionally poignant, efficient score, having a technical vocabulary that enables you to distill ideas down to their basic functional purpose and components. That means not doing a whole shit ton of technical stuff if it's not called for. I mean, this is just a bunch of really simple pads playing underneath.
Oh, shut up.
Um,
I just need to catch my
there's a lot
breath.
of
That's all.
dialogue there, so again, you just want to support it and elevate it. That's the point. Is elevate what's on
Maybe
picture.
you're right.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of it. There's a lot of different stuff you can do. What's good about Temp, combined with the fact that they've cut this to a pretty strict tempo, the editors, the picture editors, are cutting it to this music because it's A-list score. So it's already been purpose-built to picture, so that means if they were to structure their picture like rhythmically and dynamically, it would match up. So what's really nice about that is you have a good starting point for a tempo to know that if you want to land on the cuts and sort of match the editor's beats, which I'll get to that in another video, whether that's necessary or overdone or what the point of it is. But what it gives you is a reference point for tempo. And one thing that's really funny, a friend of mine, first of all, tempo is really important. It's a very emotional, necessary thing to understand what your tempo should be when you're cutting. And yeah, temp is kind of a shortcut to figuring out what that sweet spot and what your range is on the tempo. But I don't think a lot of composers think about it because your DAW, our digital audio workstation, defaults most of the time at 120 BPM. So one of my friends sat down with a metronome, a little tap tempo thing, and he switched around on primetime network TV and he tapped along with it, and pretty much every single cue that he tapped along with was at 120 BPM, which makes me believe that people are not taking into account how important tempo is as a functional technical component to scoring. And tempo doesn't mean landing on the cuts. You know, it's just because you can get the exact tempo that every cut lands on a beat doesn't mean it's going to be good score. Tempo is another layer of emotional expression, whether you choose to make the tempo kind of dynamic and rubato and make it move around it, or you just want it to be static. As long as it's right, that in itself is another technique. So that's where temp kind of helps us. Learn to make it be your friend. Listen to a lot of music and take the complex ideas and distill them down, but don't listen to scores. Listen to everything else. You know, like, draw inspiration from everything. There's so much good music out there and so much now today being created that if you just dig through the pile of noise, because there's a lot of bad music too, there's some incredible stuff that is really worthwhile to explore. Different genres, different geographic regions, different types of folk music. And by folk, I mean like historical folk music, not like bluegrass. But like there's so many places to draw inspiration. There's no excuse for just trying to copy sounding like everyone else's score. It's an important ability to have. That's just a given, that you have the ability to sound like anyone. That's part of the job, especially as early on. I mean, that literally is a job, is sounding like other composers. But yeah, I hope that gives you a bit of insight on how I interpret temp. I'm not saying that that's how you should definitively do it. It's just a suggestion and some techniques you can try to apply to your own scoring that might make things better. And I guess all I'm trying to say is think about this stuff. Don't just go into like robot mode and just go straight linear. Think about all these variables, because the more you think about it, the more you try it, the more these things go from, you know, this really long drawn out system 2 thinking to very quick intuitive system 1, where you look at that and you go, yep, you can watch it dry, you can watch it without temp, and you know exactly what you can do personally that will elevate what's going on screen. And that's just one component of what scoring is about. And yeah, I hope that helps a bit.